In the shadowed corridors of Renaissance Florence, where power shifted like morning mist and alliances crumbled faster than autumn leaves, Niccolò Machiavelli observed a truth that would echo through centuries: those who desperately seek to be loved inevitably become weak, while those who have the courage to destroy their weaker selves become indestructible. This is not mere cynicism, it is the brutal arithmetic of human nature, calculated with the precision of a master strategist who watched republics fall and princes rise on the fulcrum of this single, devastating insight. The pursuit of universal approval is perhaps the most insidious form of self-sabotage known to humanity. It transforms leaders into followers, visionaries into consensus seekers, and the bold into the timid. Machiavelli, writing in his modest study while Florence burned with political intrigue, understood that the need to be liked is not merely a character flaw, it is a fundamental misunderstanding of the nature of power, influence, and human respect. Consider the modern executive who dilutes every decision through endless committees, seeking unanimous approval before taking action. Watch the politician who shifts positions with each polling cycle, chasing the ephemeral warmth of public affection. Observe the parent who becomes their child's friend rather than their guide, or the teacher who abandons standards to maintain popularity. In each case, the same pattern emerges: the desperate pursuit of likability becomes a prison of weakness, where authentic leadership dies a slow death by 1,000 compromises. Machiavelli witnessed this phenomenon firsthand in the courts of his era. He saw princes who ruled through fear maintain their thrones for decades, while those who sought to be beloved found themselves deposed, exiled, or executed by the very people whose love they had courted. The masses, he observed, are fickle in their affections but consistent in their respect for strength. Love can be withdrawn on a whim, but fear mixed with respect, what Machiavelli termed reverent fear, creates a more durable foundation for both leadership and personal strength. The weakness inherent in seeking approval manifests in countless ways throughout daily existence. The approval seeker becomes a shapeshifter, constantly adjusting their personality, opinions, and values to match the expectations of whoever happens to be present. This endless adaptation creates a fundamental problem: if you are everything to everyone, you are nothing to yourself. The core self, that essential identity from which true strength flows, becomes so diluted and compromised that it effectively ceases to exist. This psychological fragmentation has profound consequences beyond mere personal dissatisfaction. When your sense of worth depends entirely on external validation, you become hostage to the moods, prejudices, and changing opinions of others. Your decision-making process becomes corrupted, as every choice must be filtered through the question, will this make people like me more? Rather than asking what is right, what is effective, or what serves the greater good, the approval seeker asks only what will maintain their precious but precarious popularity. The workplace provides a particularly clear laboratory for observing these dynamics. The manager who cannot bear to deliver difficult feedback watches their team's performance deteriorate as problems go unaddressed. The employee who agrees with every superior regardless of their private reservations becomes known as ineffective and untrustworthy, ironically achieving the opposite of their intended goal. The entrepreneur who tries to build a product that appeals to everyone ends up creating something that excites no one. In romantic relationships, the pattern is equally destructive. The person who submerges their own needs, interests, and personality in pursuit of their partner's approval often finds themselves abandoned for someone with more defined boundaries and authentic self-expression. The very qualities that make someone worthy of love, authenticity, strength of character, the ability to challenge and inspire, are precisely what gets sacrificed on the altar of universal approval. Machiavelli's genius lay in recognizing that this weakness is not merely personal but political. Societies led by approval seekers become weak, indecisive, and vulnerable to those who understand the true nature of power. History is littered with the remnants of civilizations that chose comfort over strength, consensus over decisive action, and the warm embrace of popular opinion over the cold necessity of effective governance. Yet Machiavelli offered more than mere diagnosis. He pointed toward a cure that is as radical as it is effective: the deliberate destruction of one's weak self. This is not about becoming cruel or indifferent to others' feelings. Rather, it is about recognizing that the part of yourself that desperately needs approval is actually your enemy, working against your own interests and the interests of those you serve. The process of destroying one's weak self begins with a fundamental shift in values. Instead of measuring success by how much you are liked, you must learn to measure it by how effective you are, how true you remain to your principles, and how well you serve the purposes that extend beyond your immediate comfort. This requires developing what Machiavelli called virtù, a combination of strength, skill, and moral courage that enables one to act decisively even when such action is unpopular. This transformation is not achieved through a single moment of revelation but through countless small acts of courage. It means speaking uncomfortable truths when silence would be easier. It means making difficult decisions based on evidence and principle rather than popularity. It means accepting that some people will dislike you, not despite your integrity, but because of it. Each time you choose effectiveness over approval, principle over popularity, you chip away at the weak self that has been your jailer. The man or woman who successfully completes this transformation, who destroys their weak, approval-seeking self, achieves a form of invincibility that Machiavelli recognized as the ultimate form of strength. They become unmanipulatable because they no longer depend on others' approval for their sense of worth. They become unpredictable to their enemies because their actions are based on principle rather than the desire to please. They become genuinely influential because people recognize authentic strength when they encounter it. This strength manifests in ways both subtle and profound. In negotiations, the person who is not desperate for agreement often achieves better outcomes because they are willing to walk away from unfavorable terms. In leadership positions, those who accept that not every decision will be popular can focus on making the right decisions rather than the easy ones. In creative endeavors, artists who stop trying to please everyone often produce their most powerful and lasting work. The transformation also creates a paradoxical effect. By ceasing to desperately seek approval, one often becomes more genuinely respected and, ultimately, more genuinely liked by the people whose opinion actually matters. There is something magnetic about authentic strength, about someone who knows who they are and acts accordingly regardless of the social consequences. This is not the shallow charisma of the people-pleaser, which evaporates under pressure, but the deep authority that comes from inner certainty and moral courage. Consider the historical examples that Machiavelli himself might have referenced. Leaders like Augustus Caesar, who understood that effective governance sometimes required unpopular decisions, maintained power and respect for decades. Contrast this with leaders who tried to please everyone and ended up pleasing no one, their reigns marked by indecision, rebellion, and ultimate failure. The pattern repeats across centuries and cultures. Those willing to be temporarily disliked in service of greater purposes often achieve lasting respect, while those who chase immediate approval find themselves ultimately despised for their weakness. Modern examples abound as well. Business leaders who are willing to make difficult strategic decisions, laying off employees, ending in profitable partnerships, or pivoting away from popular but unsustainable practices, often save their companies and, ultimately, more jobs. Military commanders who maintain discipline and make hard tactical choices protect more lives than those who seek to be popular with their troops. Parents who enforce boundaries and maintain standards, despite temporary displeasure from their children, raise more capable and confident adults. The destruction of the weak self also requires developing what might be called strategic empathy, the ability to understand and care about others' feelings without being controlled by them. This is far different from the emotional reactivity of the approval seeker, who is tossed about by every expression of displeasure like a ship in a storm. Strategic empathy allows one to acknowledge others' emotions, understand their sources, and respond appropriately while maintaining one's own center and direction. This process is particularly challenging in our current era of social media and instant feedback, where the temptation to measure worth through likes, shares, and comments has created new forms of approval addiction. The platforms themselves are designed to exploit our deepest psychological needs for acceptance and validation, creating dopamine feedback loops that can be as addictive as any substance. Breaking free from these mechanisms requires conscious effort and, often radical changes in how one engages with digital environments. The weak self that must be destroyed often masquerades as compassion, humility, or social consciousness. It whispers that standing firm on principles is selfish, that maintaining boundaries is cruel, that insisting on excellence is unfair. These are lies that the weak self tells to maintain its control. True compassion sometimes requires saying no. Real humility involves being strong enough to lead when leadership is needed. Genuine social consciousness means being willing to be unpopular in service of justice and truth. Machiavelli understood that this transformation is not a one-time event but an ongoing process. The weak self, once apparently destroyed, has a tendency to resurrect itself in new forms. The executive who conquers their need for approval in business settings might find it emerging in their personal relationships. The artist who achieves independence from public opinion might discover new forms of approval seeking in their professional circles. Vigilance and continued self-examination are essential to maintaining the strength that comes from self-sovereignty. The political implications of this philosophy extend far beyond individual development. Societies that encourage and reward authentic strength while discouraging approval seeking produce more effective institutions, more innovative solutions, and more resilient social structures. When leaders at all levels, from family heads to corporate executives to government officials, operate from strength rather than the need to be liked, the entire social fabric becomes more robust and adaptive. This is not an argument for callousness or indifference to others' feelings. Rather, it is a recognition that the highest form of service to others often requires the courage to disappoint them in the short term. The surgeon who must deliver a difficult diagnosis, the teacher who maintains high standards, the friend who speaks uncomfortable truths all serve others better by accepting temporary disapproval rather than seeking false comfort through pleasant lies. The economic dimensions of this principle are equally profound. Markets reward innovation and efficiency, not popularity contests. Companies that try to be everything to everyone typically fail, while those that serve specific needs exceptionally well often dominate their markets. The same principle applies to individuals. Those who develop deep expertise and maintain high standards, even when it makes them temporarily unpopular, often achieve greater long-term success than those who constantly adjust their offerings to chase approval. In relationships of all kinds, romantic, familial, professional, and social, this dynamic plays out with remarkable consistency. People are drawn to those who have something valuable to offer, who maintain their standards, and who cannot be easily manipulated through approval or disapproval. The person who is overly accommodating, who changes their personality to fit each social situation, who desperately seeks to avoid any conflict or displeasure, often finds themselves respected by no one and truly known by no one. The transformation from approval seeker to authentic strength requires developing what might be called outcome independence, the ability to act based on principle and long-term vision rather than immediate social feedback. This does not mean being indifferent to results, but rather being willing to accept short-term social costs in pursuit of meaningful outcomes. The person who has achieved this independence becomes genuinely free, no longer a prisoner of others' opinions or expectations. This freedom manifests in improved decision-making across all areas of life. When you are not constantly calculating how each choice will affect your popularity, you can focus on what will actually produce the results you seek. When you are not filtering every communication through the lens of approval management, you can speak with clarity and authenticity. When you are not adjusting your goals based on others' comfort levels, you can pursue excellence without compromise. The process of destroying one's weak self also reveals the difference between respect and mere likability. Respect is earned through consistency, competence, and the courage to do what is right even when it is difficult. Likability, on the other hand, is often achieved through accommodation, agreement, and the avoidance of anything that might cause discomfort. While it is possible to be both respected and liked, when forced to choose between them, respect provides a much more solid foundation for influence and effectiveness. Machiavelli observed that fear mixed with respect creates more durable loyalty than love alone. This is because fear-based respect is grounded in recognition of competence and strength, while love without respect is fragile and easily transferred. The leader who is respected may not always be liked in the moment, but they will be sought out when serious challenges arise. The parent who maintains loving but firm boundaries may face temporary resentment but will be trusted when guidance is truly needed. The modern workplace provides countless examples of this principle in action. The manager who maintains high standards and provides honest feedback, even when it causes temporary discomfort, often develops the most capable and loyal teams. The colleague who speaks up in meetings, even when their perspective is unpopular, becomes known as someone whose opinion can be trusted. The employee who is willing to say no to unreasonable requests, even at the risk of seeming difficult, often achieves better work-life balance and higher quality output. In creative and intellectual pursuits, the willingness to be disliked becomes even more crucial. Every significant innovation, artistic breakthrough, or intellectual advance has required someone to be willing to be misunderstood, criticized, or rejected by the establishment of their time. The scientist who challenges accepted theories, the artist who refuses to follow popular trends, the entrepreneur who pursues an unpopular vision, all must be willing to endure disapproval in service of their deeper purpose. The educational implications are equally significant. Students who are willing to ask difficult questions, challenge assumptions, and pursue learning for its own sake rather than for approval often achieve deeper understanding and more meaningful growth. Teachers who maintain standards and provide honest assessment, even when it temporarily damages their popularity, better serve their students' long-term development. This principle extends to parenting with particular force. Children need parents who are willing to be temporarily disliked in service of their child's development. The parent who cannot bear their child's displeasure often fails to provide the structure, discipline, and guidance that children need to develop into capable adults. The short-term comfort of being the cool parent often comes at the cost of long-term respect and the child's ultimate well-being. The destruction of one's weak self also involves recognizing and dismantling the various forms of manipulation that approval seekers are particularly vulnerable to. When you desperately need to be liked, you become an easy target for those who understand how to exploit this need. Guilt trips, emotional manipulation, and social pressure all lose their power over someone who has achieved true self-sovereignty. This transformation requires developing what might be called moral courage, the willingness to stand alone when necessary, to speak truth to power, and to maintain one's principles even when doing so is costly. This is different from mere stubbornness or contrarianism. It is the strength that comes from having thought deeply about one's values and being willing to pay the price for living according to them. The political and social applications of this philosophy are profound. Societies benefit when their citizens are strong enough to resist popular but destructive movements, to speak out against injustice even when it is unpopular to do so, and to maintain their principles under pressure. The person who has destroyed their weak, approval-seeking self becomes a stabilizing force in their community, someone who can be counted on to do what is right rather than what is easy or popular. In times of crisis, this strength becomes even more valuable. When popular opinion swings wildly, when fear and emotion override rational thought, when the crowd mentality takes hold, those who have achieved independence from the need for approval become essential anchors of stability and reason. They are the ones who can make difficult decisions, speak uncomfortable truths, and maintain perspective when others are swept away by the current of popular sentiment. The economic value of this transformation cannot be overstated. In business, those who can make decisions based on data and long-term strategy rather than the desire to be liked often achieve superior results. They can negotiate more effectively, lead more decisively, and adapt more quickly to changing conditions. They are not paralyzed by the fear of disappointing others or making unpopular choices. The process of transformation also involves learning to distinguish between legitimate feedback and mere opinion. The approval seeker tends to give equal weight to all criticism and praise, becoming overwhelmed by the constant stream of input from others. The person who has destroyed their weak self learns to evaluate feedback based on the credibility of the source, the validity of the reasoning, and the alignment with their own carefully considered values and objectives. This discernment allows for continuous improvement without the emotional volatility that comes from being overly reactive to others' opinions. Criticism can be evaluated objectively and incorporated when valuable, while invalid or malicious feedback can be dismissed without emotional disturbance. This creates a much more efficient and effective process for growth and development. The relationship between strength and service also becomes clearer through this lens. True service to others often requires the strength to do what is best for them rather than what they want in the moment. The doctor who recommends a difficult but necessary treatment, the coach who pushes athletes beyond their comfort zones, the mentor who provides challenging feedback all serve others better through strength than they would through accommodation. This principle applies equally to self-service. Taking care of one's own needs, maintaining personal boundaries, and pursuing one's goals with determination is not selfish, it is necessary for being able to effectively serve others. The person who constantly sacrifices their own well-being to gain approval ultimately has less to offer and becomes a burden rather than a resource to their community. The transformation from weakness to strength also involves developing a different relationship with conflict. The approval seeker views conflict as something to be avoided at all costs, leading to the accumulation of unresolved issues and growing resentment. The person who has destroyed their weak self understands that conflict is often necessary for growth, resolution, and progress. They can engage in difficult conversations, address problems directly, and work through disagreements without being paralyzed by the fear of damaging relationships. This ability to handle conflict constructively becomes a significant competitive advantage in all areas of life. Relationships become healthier when issues are addressed directly rather than being allowed to fester. Business partnerships become more productive when disagreements can be discussed openly. Teams perform better when problems are identified and solved rather than being ignored to preserve harmony. The philosophical implications of Machiavelli's insight extend to questions of identity and authenticity. The approval seeker never truly knows who they are because they are constantly adapting to meet others' expectations. The person who has achieved self-sovereignty, on the other hand, develops a clear and stable sense of identity that serves as a foundation for all their decisions and actions. This authentic self-knowledge provides several crucial benefits. It allows for more accurate self-assessment, leading to better decision-making about career choices, relationships, and life direction. It creates consistency in behavior, making one more trustworthy and predictable to others. It enables the development of genuine expertise and skill, since energy is not wasted on maintaining false personas. The journey of self-destruction and renewal that Machiavelli advocated is ultimately about liberation, freedom from the exhausting task of constantly managing others' perceptions, freedom from the anxiety of always seeking approval, freedom to pursue excellence and truth regardless of their popularity. This liberation requires courage, discipline, and persistence, but the rewards extend far beyond personal satisfaction. Those who complete this transformation become forces of positive change in their communities. They are the ones who speak up against wrongdoing, who maintain standards when others are willing to compromise, who provide stability and leadership when others are paralyzed by the need to please everyone. They become what Machiavelli would recognize as truly powerful, not because they dominate others, but because they have mastered themselves. The man who destroys his weak self can never be destroyed by others because he has already eliminated his greatest vulnerability, the desperate need for external validation. He has built his identity on solid ground, his principles, his competence, his authentic self, rather than on the shifting sands of popular opinion. This makes him not only stronger but ultimately more valuable to others, as they come to recognize that his respect and approval, when earned, is worth having precisely because it is not freely given to all. In the end, Machiavelli's hard truth reveals itself to be profoundly liberating. The weakness that comes from seeking universal approval is not a character flaw to be managed but a fundamental misunderstanding of the nature of strength, influence, and human value to be corrected. The path to true power over oneself and in service to others lies not in being liked by all, but in being worthy of respect from those who matter, beginning with oneself. This is the paradox that Machiavelli understood. By ceasing to desperately seek love, one becomes more worthy of it. By accepting that not everyone will approve of your choices, you gain the freedom to make better choices. By destroying the weak self that craves constant validation, you build the strong self that commands genuine respect. This transformation is not easy, but it is the foundation of every form of meaningful achievement and authentic influence. The legacy of this philosophy extends far beyond individual development to the health of societies, organizations, and cultures. When people understand and embody this principle, they create environments where excellence can flourish, where difficult problems can be addressed, and where progress is possible even when it requires temporary discomfort or unpopular choices. They become the leaders, innovators, and moral exemplars that every healthy society needs. Machiavelli's hard truth ultimately points toward a simple but revolutionary idea. True strength comes not from being invulnerable to criticism but from being invulnerable to the need for approval. The man or woman who achieves this freedom becomes genuinely indestructible, not because nothing can harm them, but because they have eliminated the internal weakness that makes destruction possible. They have become, in the deepest sense, their own person, and, paradoxically, this makes them far more valuable to others than they ever were when desperately seeking everyone's approval.